Hi, and welcome to my talk about neologisms and loanwords in Icelandic. Before I talk about any of this, I will just quickly introduce myself because there are so many people who don't know who I am. So I'm Siru, and I'm not a native speaker of Icelandic. I'm Finnish. And now I have been living here in Barcelona for 7 years. I am multilingual medical translator. I do other translations as well, but mostly medical. And I studied at the University of Iceland for 5 years. I did 3 years in Icelandic as a second language, which I have a BA diploma of, and then I studied my master's in translation in and here's a picture of me with the with the university hoodie and the sign just before I left Iceland. So I have some knowledge of Icelandic, and I thought that I would explain to you how Icelandic works, like how they create new words, how they recycle some words, because it's quite interesting actually. So before I start with that, I'm going to talk quickly about Icelandic in general, because there are quite a few people who don't know anything or just know a little about Icelandic. So Icelandic in Icelandic is Íslenska. It's a North Germanic language, so it's an Indo-European language. And there are more or less 315,000 native speakers. This also varies according to the source, but this is an average that I found. And it's an inflected language with 4 cases and 3 grammatical genders, which some of you might think, oh, like German. So yeah, it has some similarities with German grammar, but we'll talk about that later. And Iceland is situated here, quite far away. And yeah, it's a tiny island with not that many inhabitants actually. And this is the flag. So a quick overview of Icelandic. And before I start talking about the neologisms, it's important to know the history a little. Well, a little. I'm not going to talk about the 1,200 years, 1,100 years of history. Just a quick overview. So the original settlers, they came from Western Norway in the 9th century. There had been people living in Iceland before, but like these people, they came and they stayed and they wrote about it, and so it's known that it happened sometime around 870. And when they came, they spoke Old Norse, the Western dialect of Old Norse. And since there were quite a few people from different parts of Norway, and also from different parts of Western Norway, there were quite a few different dialects of Old Norse. And then some of you might know about sagas, which are old prose stories and histories, and epic poetry like Eddas. So these were written starting from the 12th century. And since Icelandic hasn't really changed, like written Icelandic hasn't changed that much, Icelanders usually, they can read the sagas with like modernized spelling and some like footnotes and some help. And I had to do that as well at the university. I had to read those as well, and it was something that I could do, and I was surprised. So they have this old like history of writing things down, and if you have ever seen an Icelandic text, you might notice that it doesn't really, like, you don't really know if this is the verb, and what, like, why does this word have this different ending in this word, and why is this name different, like in this sentence and than in the other one. That's because Icelandic is more archaic than other Germanic languages, because it was isolated for so long. It was quite far away. You needed quite a lot of time to get there by your boat. And it's a bit, well, it's a small island, but it takes a lot of time to go to different places, because you cannot go through. You have to go around the island, or you can go through, but it's not, I wouldn't recommend it. And that's why it kept some of the characteristics that are no longer seen, for example, in Swedish or Norwegian. And the first grammatical treatise, which is, I wrote it here in Icelandic, Fyrsta Málfræðiritgerðin. It was written around 1125, between 1175. Not sure when. It's quite hard to date. But it was the first grammatical treatise, and it uses the technique of minimal pairs to show the differences between sounds in Icelandic. And it has been very important for people who study the history of Icelandic and how it has been developed, because it also, for example, mentions the existence of nasal vowels, which nowadays don't exist in Icelandic. And without this treatise, we wouldn't know that they existed. And it shows the state of the language just before the sagas were written. So it's quite an important work. So that was just a quick overview of the history. I could talk for hours about that, but I don't have the time. So I suggest you go to Wikipedia, for example. They have information in quite a few languages, and also texts that are translated or transliterated into Icelandic and English, at least, and some other Nordic languages as well. And the reason also, besides the grammar, the reason why Icelandic looks so different compared to other Nordic languages is because of linguistic purism in Icelandic, hreindungustefna. And it began in early 17th century when Iceland was doing trade with Danish and German people, and they had a big influence in Icelandic, and also probably because there were so many things that Icelandic didn't have words, so they just took the German or Danish words, or, well, we know that there were people from other places as well. So when Icelandic people didn't have a word, of course, they took the word from the other language. And then in the 18th century, Eggert Ólafsson, he traveled through the country, and he saw that the situation of Icelandic was quite bad. People were using words from different languages, and he was afraid that Icelandic would just be less and less spoken and replaced by other languages or influences from other languages. So he wrote the first orthographical dictionary with suggestions of how to write things and about the phonological rules. And it was the first orthographical dictionary. And then the first Icelandic grammar was written by Rasmus Rask, who's actually Danish, but he learned Icelandic when he was young, and it became his favorite language, and he became really determined about preserving the language, and he started to work on it. So he wrote the first Icelandic grammar, and he he spoke about how it's possible to create new words in Icelandic by putting words together and using the techniques that I'll show you later. And then Fjölnir was a journal that was published during 9 years in Copenhagen in Denmark by 4 Icelandic men called Konráð Gíslason, Jónas Hallgrímsson, Brynjólfur Pétursson, and Thomas Simonson. And these were called Fjölnismenn, literally the men of Fjölnir. And it contained texts in Icelandic, and during this period, people started to talk more about the sagas and the Vikings, and like the romanticism was quite strong. So these people, during 9 years, they published this journal, and it was very important. And then Icelandic Language Institute, Íslensk Málstöð, it was established in 1985. And it's responsible for planning and preservation of Icelandic, and they create glossaries and publish and provide guidelines, and just like they see that Icelandic is, well, preserved and used correctly. So this is the linguistic purism. And here are some word formation strategies that are used in, well, other languages as well, not just Icelandic. I put the Icelandic word in the parentheses so that you can see that usually they don't really look like the original, the English word. Like compounding, samsetning literally means together putting. There's compounding, there's morphological derivation, avleysla, revival of old words, nýmerking, meaning new meaning, portmanteau, samruni, loan translation, literally tökuþýðing, like taken translation, and phonosemantic matching, which is aðlögun. And I will give some examples of all these so you can see. And you don't have to speak any Icelandic to follow this. I have always put there's the Icelandic word, of course, but there's also everything in English as well. So you don't have to speak Íslenska. Okay, let's start with compounding, samsetning. This is quite usual. So if you study Icelandic, you will see quite a lot of these. For example, ferðamaður. If you see ferðamaður, you might not really know what's going on, but if you know that ferð is journey and maður is a man, journeyman, travel man, it means the tourist. And then the second example, bílstjóri. Bíll is a car and stjóri is a steerer, so a driver, car steerer. Flugvél, flug is a flight and vél is a machine, so flight machine, airplane. Finnish actually has the same system in the Finnish word, so it's a literal translation of flight machine. Sjónvarp, sjón is vision and varp is projector, so vision projector meaning television. Íbúi, indweller, is a resident, and mótmæla, to speak against, is to protest. And áttaviti, I like this one, something that knows the direction, meaning a compass. There was a word for compass, which was taken, I believe, from Danish, kompass. So before this word was put together, the older generations used kompass, and then newer generations learned áttaviti, for example, at school. So sometimes you can also hear when some words were introduced to the language because of the age of the people who are using it. Or if you read some old books, for example, you might see some Danish loan words in those books. So this is compounding, so putting words together and creating new words like that. There's also morphological derivation, which means that you just put like suffixes in words to have a new meaning. So, for example, this is a classic example, þyrla. It was a verb, or it is a verb that means to whirl. So they made a noun out of it, þyrla, which is a helicopter. And then, for example, tengja, to connect. They made a noun with the suffix git. So tengit is a connection. Játa, there's the word já, yes, here. So játa, to say yes, and játning is a confession, or saying yes to something, but it's a noun. From vera, you can have veruleiki, and there are other words with the suffix leiki. Reality. Fræði, you can have fræðingur, which would kind of be like sciencer, but scholar is a better translation of fræðingur. And then leika, you can have leikari from leika, which is an actor or a player. And with that ending, you can also have like kennari. Kenna is to teach. So kennari is a teacher. Bakari, a baker. And there are other words like that. And then also another way to make a noun out of a verb is to put the un ending. So stjórna, to control, and stjórnun is an administration or control, but as a noun. So with endings, suffixes, you can also change the word to have another meaning, or to change from verb to noun. This one is usually whenever someone says that, oh yeah, Icelandic recycles words. So I found these few examples for you of the revival of old words, which is nýmerking. So sími, it used to mean a thread, and now it means a phone, because when you had the old phones with the thread, so that's now a phone. And skjár used to mean like a window frame, but now it's a screen. And you can see here, I took an example that I found on the internet. So this is a skjár now, a screen. And then skrá used to be a parchment skin, but now it's a register or a catalog. So if you take the word here, sími, and skrá, you get símaskrá, which is the telephone book. And here's the símaskrá of 1985 with all the phone numbers and addresses of Icelandic people. And then þulur, it used to mean like a wise man, but then when TVs came and they had the announcers, they started to use that word for the announcer on the TV. And then portmanteau, samruni, is another way of making new words. This is not as common in Icelandic. I couldn't find that many examples, and maybe there are some words that I don't even realize that are portmanteau words. But the classic example is tölva, which means a computer, but it has the word tala, which is a number, and völva is a seers, or someone who sees or can tell the future. So it's someone who knows the numbers. So yeah, tala plus völva is a tölva, a computer. And my favorite, this is not really like used in like official texts, but jamviskupit. I didn't know the correct English word. If you speak Finnish, that's morkis, but it's composed of jam, which is a party, and samviskupit, which is regret. So it's the feeling when you wake up in the morning after partying and you're like, oh, what have I done? Why did I drink so much? So that's jamviskupit. And then hrutskýring is mansplaining, but it has the word ram, hrutur, and útskýring, explanation. And then I also found an example where someone said that it can also be like Mr. explanation, because HR is the abbreviation of herra, which is Mr. So it can be RAM explanation or Mr. explanation. So this is one way to create new words. Then there's loan translation, which is quite common in other languages as well, not just Icelandic. So tökuþýðing. So let's start with stjörnufræði. So if you see star science, you might be able to guess that it's astronomy. And I think in my presentation, or when I wrote about this presentation, I asked what the word stærðfræði is. So stærð is size and fræði is science. So science is math. Smásjá, I really like this one. So it's small and to see. And what is something very small to see? Well, a microscope. I think it's very cute. Orkudrykkur, from orka, and drykkur, energy drink. Hjólastóll, from wheel and chair. And then we have höfðaborg, which if you see this in a text, you might be like, it's another city or a village in Iceland, but it's actually a loan from Dutch, and it means literally Cape Town, höfði and borg. So höfðaborg is a Cape Town. Körfubolti, again a literal translation, a basketball. And forrit, I really like this one. Forrit is like a computer program or something technical, but it means like pre-writing, like the English word actually, programma from Greek, which means pro is before, or before, and gramma is writing. So it's actually from Greek through English. And then I put this long word as an example of another loan translation. Kransæða hjá veituaðgerð. So as I as I work with medical texts, seeing this, it would take me a while. Like if I see it first, I'm like, oh, okay, what is this? But then when you know that kransæði is coronary artery, hjáveita is bypass, and aðgerð is surgery, it's not as scary. It's not as scary as it looks. So this is quite common, and I think it's quite cute as well. Well, I really like smásjá. And then phonosemantic matching, arlögun. So there are some words that sound like the word in the original language, and then they just like transferred into an Icelandic word, like eitni. I like this one. Eitni is eight, but it's taken from the verb eyða, to destroy. So it's something that destroys, literally. And ratsjá is radar. And it means something that finds the way and to see. And I like páfagaukur. If you hear páfagaukur, you might recognize that it has something to do with papagaí in German, and maybe papagayo in Portuguese. So they took this word and they're like, let's put like the something that sounds like Icelandic, or is Icelandic but sounds like the original one. So páfagaukur is a parrot, but it literally means Pope cuckoo. And then there are some words here that are just like taken from English, like scout, scoute, gear, gear, jeppe is jeep, and clone is a clone. And there are some words like this taken from English, like for example, yeppe, because there were quite a few people from America and the UK when they like during the Second World War. So there were quite a lot of soldiers in Iceland, and that way they also had quite a lot of influence in the Icelandic language. Yeah, there are some efforts sometimes that don't really get the green light from the speakers, let's say. Like, for example, the word for a jet, the airplane. First, they suggested the word þrýstiloftsflugvél, literally compressed airplane. But it's a mouthful, and especially if you compare to jet. So now the word is thota, which comes from the verb þjóta, to rush or to dash. So it's much more concise than þrýstiloftsflugvél. And then I mentioned gir earlier. The first suggestion was ganghraðaskiptir, which is movement speed change, or something that changes the movement, speed movement, or yeah, it's a mouthful as well. So now it's just gir, like in English. And then this can sometimes still be seen in some texts. Bjúgaldin, literally sausage fruit, but now people just use banana. There are some other fruit and vegetables as well with a similar name. Like, I think tomato used to be rauðaldin, like a red fruit, but you don't really see that anymore. Maybe in some old books, but nobody really says like, "Hey, can you give me a bjúgaldin?" It's like a sausage fruit. No. But are there any foreign words in daily use in Icelandic? Yes, there are. How nice for you to ask. For example, here are some words: coffee, pizza. There's also the more Icelandic version, which is flatbaka. It literally means like flat pie, but I don't really see it anywhere. And I put this picture here as well, so that you see, here's the Friday pizza, föstudagspizzan. So it's feminine. And I just noticed now that there's a pizza sosa, so a pizza sauce by Hans, but it should be pizzusosa because it's a feminine. So I don't know why. Maybe it looked better according to them to have it in wrong grammatical case. Well, so yeah, pizza, usually it should be written with the TS. Pasta, metri, bitl. There was another word suggested for bitl, but now it's easier to say bitl. Súkkulaði, chocolate. Oh yeah, bitl is a car. Like if you know Swedish, bil. Yeah, súkkulaði, chocolate, and tómatur, tomato, not rauðaldin. And there are some other words as well, but these are just examples of the words that are, well, taken and made into an Icelandic word. But then there's also slangur that usually people, I guess people do in every language. Like here in Spain, people say es muy heavy. But there are quite a few people in Iceland who use quite a lot of slang. For example, joke is joke, juice, and not savi for juice. Töff, I like töff. It comes from the English word tough. So töff is like something cool. And if you're a cool person, you can use the suffix that we saw earlier with leikari. So you can be töffari, so you're really cool. Party, this is a neuter noun, so party. Success, You have to use the aspiration because there are two Ks, but success, cutie pie, tattoo. There are Icelandic words for these as well, but people say tattoo. Punk. Sjoppa is a small shop with usually like candy and some snacks. Lockdown was quite a used word last year. Lockdown. Gorgeous. Someone is very gorgeous. Atjamma is to go and party. It comes from the verb to jam to music. So atjamma. Make a sense. To make sense. People can say, that makar ekki sense. It doesn't make any sense. Or I make a sense with an accent on the E. And for example, a tjekka, to check a party. Yeah, a tjekka partit. A party var success. So there are quite a few slang words, mostly taken from English, and also putting together slang words and normal Icelandic words. Like a friend of mine once referred to a bank that he always had to wait for a long time, that it was basic chill staður, so like a basic chill place. And yeah, prekko, if you're pregnant you can say yeah, ég prekko, so it's, or prekko. Yeah, sometimes you just hear these slangs pronounced in an Icelandic way and you're like, they're really creative. But yeah, it makes sense. So unfortunately, I don't have, I could talk about this for hours, but unfortunately I don't have the time for that. So do you have any questions that you would like to ask? I can try to answer as best as I can. Do you know if similar principles of word formation are used in Faroese? I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, there are similar ways of making neologisms in Faroese. My Faroese is not that good. I understand it quite well, but I don't really speak it. But there are also quite a few loans from Danish because it's part of Denmark. But yeah, I think they have same principles as well, which unfortunately I cannot say any examples right now, but I believe so, yeah. Are most neologisms constructed deliberately, or does it happen naturally too, i.e. through young people, subcultures, etc.? It happens, well, for example, if there's a new technical device or something, sometimes people actually suggest the new word for that. Sometimes there are like polls that people can suggest new words. And then sometimes people just there might be like a scientific article where someone just writes the word and then people start using it. So it depends on, I would say, depends on the field as well. So it can happen naturally too. Sæl, Siru, sæl. Any resources you can recommend for intermediate learners except for Icelandic online? That's a good question, because I haven't really studied it after I left, or after I graduated from the university. Maybe you can try Italki. I'm not actually sure. I can try to check if there are, but I think you're probably better at Googling than I am. So unfortunately, I cannot give any examples right now, but there should be. I'm pretty sure there is. The measures used to save Icelandic look like something anti-natural. Imagine forbidding loanwords to French or Russian. Of course, it won't work. But in Icelandic, it did. Why? I think it's also because people in Iceland are so determined to to preserve their language, because they know that there are not that many speakers of Icelandic, and in order to actually maintain Icelandic as it is right now, they have to make the effort. Of course, I mean, there are so many young people nowadays who speak fluent English, even children who speak fluent English, because, for example, they don't dub anything in Iceland, they use subtitles, so people hear English every day. But they kind of have to make the effort to take these loan words. No, sorry, to not take these loan words, to use the Icelandic new words or loan translations in order to, well, to follow the linguistic purism. So I think it's more or less something that they know they have to do. Have you encountered similar language purism and word formation in non-Indo-European compounding languages? I don't actually know myself. I don't know non-Indo-European compounding languages yet, besides Finnish, and I'm going to start learning Turkish this summer. But it happens in Finnish as well. Like, I remember for the word couch, or sofa, we had a very long suggestion. It literally translates to something as like softened mass chair or something, but it's sohva in Finnish now. And there are some suggestions, but then people don't really like them, and so in Finnish it happens sometimes, and it would be interesting to see how it is in other in other compounding languages as well. Can it exactly be known who and when coined a particular neologism? Yeah, actually, sometimes if it's used for the first time in a book, that way you know, like, who created it or who heard it somewhere and put it in his or her book. And then there are some authors like Jonas Hallgrímsson, who was one of the publishers of the journal Fjölnir. He actually created quite a few new words, and the Icelandic Language Institute also does that. Like, for example, with science, and biology. There are some authors that did quite a lot, and some writers as well, like Halldór Laxness. He also created some words that people actually use nowadays. Your best advice, resources for beginners. I would say, if you can find teach yourself Icelandic. That's what I started with when I moved to Iceland. I was an au pair, and I wanted to know how the grammar works. So I went to the library in Selfoss and I got the book. So it helped me. I think Icelandic Online is quite good. And then I believe there are quite a few videos on YouTube where people teach like basic Icelandic. So I would suggest you check those out. And yeah, I hope maybe one day we'll have a Duolingo course as well. We'll see. Yeah, thank you for all your questions. I hope you learned something new. If you have any further questions, you can find my information in my profile in the platform. You might see me around in some language practice rooms, and yeah, you can also just Google me and come and ask if you have any questions or just want to talk. So yeah, tack fyrir og bless bless.